We hear a lot about psychedelic-assisted therapy, but 3 out of 4 people who choose to consume psychedelics do so at home or in nature with friends or loved ones. I'm April, founder of SetSet, an integration platform to help you get the most out of your psychedelic experiences. The podcast episode you're about to listen to may reference one of my previous shows, The High Guide or How to Do the Pot, because I've been a trusted source in cannabis and psychedelics since 2015. I invite you to visit getsetset.com and sign up for our newsletter to receive your free guide on set and setting to make the most of your next psychedelic journey. This podcast discusses cannabis and is intended for audiences 21 and over.
It was just so intense, and I just didn't want to be that high. And I was like, so many people out there have this problem. They want to consume edibles, but they've had a bad experience, or they want to consume edibles and they have no idea how to dose themselves.
Welcome to The High Guide. I'm your host, April Pride. Most of us know either firsthand or through someone else a bad experience with cannabis edibles. And too often it's one of these single events that forever affects their interactions with the plant, where responses like, weed really fucks me up, or no thanks, I prefer to drink, become lifetime reasonings to never get high. On this episode of The High Guide, we'll share a memorable story of an unexpected edible dose, along with a few tips from our guides for how to avoid these oftentimes traumatizing incidents. We all have a story, which brings us to our glossary term of the week, distillate. While you likely associate oils and butters with cannabis edibles, distillate is yet another very common option used for infusion. In fact, distillate is the most common base used in vape carts and edibles made today. It can also be dabbed and ingested orally, making it a very versatile form of cannabis. It's highly potent and pure, so if you're ingesting some, make sure you know just what you're getting into. Our guides for this episode of The High Guide are Kimberly Dillon, founder of CBD Stress-Less beauty brand Frig, Lisa Snyder, co-founder of Tokativity, and Devika Maskey, co-founder and CEO of Sonoma, which offers cannabis culinary experiences. There's a lot to learn here, but we'll kick it off with a story from Kimberly.
So I love edibles more than any other way to consume cannabis. I will say 2 opposing things. One, I'm not a big drinker, but I like the idea. I love when you're kind of dizzy and drunk. So I say that to say I've never had a bad edible experience because I like the feeling of being disoriented. I don't know if that makes sense, but
it does. I'm just trying to figure out where the fun comes in.
Like, I just really love that. Like, I have no idea what's going on. One of the things that I do, and this sounds horrible, so I used to be the chief marketing officer for a company called Papa and Barkley. And this was like right around 2016 before the rules were in place. And people were making infused everything, and they would just be in the office. And so you would just learn to know when to ask, like, is that infused or not? But it was Easter or Passover or something, and there was challah bread. And it was just laying on the table, and I was like, well, how would you infuse challah bread? Like, that wouldn't, whatever, I'll take a slice. Anyway, I'm driving down the 5, and when I get high, my brain just shuts off on edibles. Apparently, I had stopped as if there was a stop sign, but I was on the freeway.
Oh my God. Kids, do not try this at home. And no one in the industry recommends that you eat. Oh, but you didn't know it was infused, right? So this was not on purpose.
My intense experience where I was just like, oh, someone should have like completely labeled this. It's about like, I find that when people have these experiences, a lot of times they have no idea what they took, how many milligrams. Like there's usually a missing piece of information in a lot of the horror stories I've heard personally.
Yes, definitely. Yeah, the episode. So, okay, what happened after you stopped on the 5?
You know, I'm just touched by God because a cop came up to me and I thought he was trying to ask me out. And he was like, no, you're stopped in the middle of a freeway.
That doesn't seem touched by God.
No, in the sense that then he stopped, the whole thing was funny. and was like,
oh, you told him, did you tell him the
ma'am.
truth?
Yeah.
You're like,
Oh
I
my
mean,
God.
that's amazing. He's like,
my
ma'am,
God.
just get home safely, please. Is that what he said to you? They always say that. Just get home safely,
Yeah,
please.
Okay, while Kimberly clearly has a wonderful attitude about her edible experience gone awry, it's safe to say that not all of us would react with such composure or humor. But her story absolutely illuminates how a scenario can quickly shift into unexpected territories and what could have been done to prevent it in the first place. Hint, something like labeling.
I think there's ethical edibles, when you want to share them, is so important. And I think the ethics of this are, if you make edibles, to try to communicate with clarity that it is an edible and potentially how much THC or CBD is in there, and label it. Just as if you were labeling something that might have like an allergen in it, you know, it's like, I think it's just the responsible thing to do. And when we were doing in-person events, you know, some women wanted to come and bring edibles, and we had a very hardcore rule that if that was the case, that it had to be less than 5 milligrams per piece or whatever it is, and it had to be very clearly labeled, and it had to be a way so that it's not confusing with things that are not, because that's something that you know, us as cannabis consumers, we're like, oh, you know, like that was it, you know, that was an edible, I didn't realize it, you know, we can kind of laugh it off, but people can be traumatized by consuming something they didn't realize was, you know, was an edible. And I feel like the responsible thing for us as folks in the industry, and also, you know, we can advocate for this, is like, if you're going to bring an edible to a party, label it, keep it away from the snacks that are not, and, you know, try to make it low dose, unless it's like a crazy stoner party and you really truly, it's like everybody knows what's up. That's a whole different story. But if you have mixed company, then I think the responsible thing for folks to do is to label.
Thankfully, labeling items that have been infused with cannabis takes the biggest bite out of the confusion. Yes, you have consumed a weed edible, but do you know how much weed was in it? Here we find the confusion with dosing a consistent deterrent to a positive edible experience.
You know, it's interesting, as an edibles judge for High Times, there were all these different edibles that I was trying, and all kinds of different ways that they were communicating how to dose it. And even though I'm in the cannabis industry, I work every day, all day long, you know, in the space, I was still confused by many of the packages and how do you break apart something that isn't, you know, already broken apart, like a chocolate bar or something? And how do you stop yourself from eating more than just 5 milligrams, like a little tiny bite, when it's so delicious you want to eat the whole thing, you know? These are all really interesting questions to ponder. And I do think that there needs to be a lot of work done in the edible space in regards to packaging and communicating, you know, and making it very easy. Like, I've also gotten bottles of things that have droppers with no labels on the droppers. So you don't actually know if you're taking, you know, again, 10 milligrams or 2 milligrams. It's so confusing. So I think the issues just really lie in the confusion around dosing in general. And we have a long way to go for folks who really feel comfortable making those choices for themselves. And in the meantime, we need things that are like already cut apart, already in some kind of gummy form, very clearly labeled and consistent.
Just making sure everyone is really clear on the dosing of everything is super important. And especially if there's a mixed crowd, and we want to create welcoming spaces and we want everyone to have fun. So we don't want somebody who feels like awkward in the corner, not wanting to talk because they over medicated. We want everybody to be social and enjoying the experience.
I was telling someone, I guess it was yesterday, that even if you have a, quote, bad edibles experience, there's always a learning, right? There's always something you can look back, whether it's like, I can't trust myself in that situation again, or I can't trust that friend in that situation again, right? To look out for me, give me the right thing, whatever the case may be. I feel like there's always a learning with bad edible experiences.